how would you suggest bringing up the topic to someone who has an addiction?
Tricky. It's always a tricky one. First things first, you never want somebody to feel like they're getting an intervention, right? You see it in movies, or you'll hear people talk about, oh, they need an intervention. You have to be real careful with stuff like that, because you're automatically going to put someone on the defense. I would say one of the best things any one of us could ever practice in our life, we see somebody who is struggling with something, is to ask them open-ended questions. Okay, open-ended questions are questions that don't have a yes no response. So, meaning, hey, could you tell me more about why you like this game so much? What is it about this game that makes you want to play it all the time? Right?
Hello, you beautiful people. I should probably unmute Stacy now. There we go, Stacy. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. All right. Um, so this is the first of hopefully many um AOCast. Oh, there's Motown. Um, so tonight I want to focus heavily. This is kind of like one of those things where we're learning as we go, and of course doing it live in front of a bunch of people. So it's not like we get a chance to redo it if we need to. Um, so I wanna just take time to go through the topic, throw some things out, focus very heavily on the chat, get your guys' feedback if you guys have anything that you want to talk about, and then kind of hear things from Stacy, your perspective as well. So if you can just kind of, for anybody who doesn't know you, which is basically pretty much everybody here, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi there. My name is Stacy. I am a licensed mental health therapist, and I'm here to talk about that stuff, but certainly not to talk about diagnoses or medications. Just to be some support and kind of help navigate through some general stuff.
How things relate to other addictions. I think the basics are so important, and finding that safe, loving support. Perfect. So if you or anybody else out there has any questions as we're going along, feel free to shout them out. We might not be able to get to everything, but at least we'll do our best to kind of focus on the areas that are important to the chat, basically. Um, Perfect. Okay, so one of the things from you, Stacy, I kind of want to talk about how, from your expertise in general, I mean, when it comes to either your experience in the past or kind of just on a professional level, the idea of people judging others for the use of video games.
Absolutely. I think it's a topic that, it has an ebb and flow to it. People will accuse their kids of being addicted to video games, and then when it's a popular topic, and then it goes away for a little bit, and then it comes back, right? It kind of just does this wave effect. We've seen videos of, parents destroying a $300 or $400 piece of equipment, right? Because they can't their child not to play the video game. And they have an opinion of that, personally and professionally, and I'll reserve that at this time. But I think it's a shame when people make a quick decision, or have an opinion about it, because video games, there's a lot of benefits to it. Right? It's there's proof out there that it does help with um, anxiety and depression. It can also actually help some trauma. People who've been through traumas, it can actually help them regain a sense of control, depending on what it is that they're dealing with in the, what the trauma might have been. So there's a lot of positive things to video games, in my opinion, professionally.
So I know it's funny. I was watching. doing a little bit of research for this, and I came across a couple TED Talks that I know you and I have had a lot of conversations about TED Talks in the past. And one of the ones that I came across was from a guy named Cam Adair. And basically his whole thing, it was a 5-minute conversation, and it was escaping video game addiction from TEDx Boulder. And there were 4 kind of primary things that he touched on of why people become addicted to video games. And I actually pulled up some stats too, I think, that are kind of important of really showing how easy it is to become addicted. So the first thing that he talked about, and feel free to cut me off and let's touch base as we go along here. So utilizing it as a temporary escape from problems. I think that's a big one, at least for me, kind of from my experiences in the past. That's definitely probably the big one, I think, for most people. And one of the reasons I think this is such an important topic for, people like myself, who is, not only am I a gamer, but I'm a streamer, and, I've played video games pretty much my entire life. I've dealt with the addiction. And I think a lot of people who, and it's not everybody, obviously, but a lot of people who play or stream on Twitch or, rest in peace Mixer or YouTube or whatever, they have some sort of addiction. Whether it's a small addiction and it's just, hey, I'm going to go ahead and play for 8 hours a day, or it's somebody who that is their life and it starts to cause problems outside. I know, without going too deep into personal stuff in the past, it's actually something that, and you and I have had conversations about this. Back when I was married to my ex-wife, I played World of Warcraft, and I played a lot of World of Warcraft. And I think that's probably, at least for me, by far one of the most addictive games out there, because it's one of those things that, and I'm sure anybody can attest to this, it's one of those things where there's always that constant goal, and that goal continuously gets further and further and further away from you. So the more you play, the more you can hit that goal. And if you're a completionist, I think that's probably the most dangerous thing you can do, especially for a game like that, because not only is it sinking your money at $15 a month, but it's now sinking your time. And I can think back to, there was a time frame where she walked out screaming at me because it was either go out and do what I had promised her to do or stay home and raid. And I'm sure, having an addiction, you can guess what I chose. And it was, at the time, it wasn't one of those like big eye-opening moments, but it's a moment that I think I will always remember, because that was my defining moment of realizing at, a little bit later down the road that it is a problem. It is something that I definitely dealt with. So I think using that and using the problems that happened inside the marriage and the problems that I was having at the time and just escaping from all of that, I think that just fueled upon fueled upon fueled. When I was younger, I dealt with a ton of depression. So I sunk myself into video games at that point too. So I wouldn't have to deal with it. I wouldn't have to deal with the problems of the world. And well, before I go into other things, did you have anything on that?
No, in fact, I remember this, and is that the one where you sold one of your characters, or you sold something?
Oh yeah,
Was
well
that the game?
that's the game. That's when I realized it was definitely an issue, because I sold the character and then it was your typical scam, and ended up not only being out a ton of money, but now I got that account banned because it was against their terms of service. And I was the best geared druid on the server, sold the account, got money. Damn it. Stupid camera. Got money taken away, and then ended up having the account banned forever. So that wasn't any fun.
No, and I remember that actually. You had a bit of a meltdown over that, and I
oh yeah.
remember that's the first time I really kind of clued into your addiction with it, and I was like, yeah, I had friends that played World of Warcraft and EverQuest, and,
Hmm.
and I know I used to kind of sass and joke around a little bit about people that would rather raid than out and do something. And I had a boyfriend at the time, years ago, who same thing. He would have much rather been part of that game, and I didn't understand that level of it because as a gamer myself too, I never dealt with the addiction. For me, it was always I was always able to process through. So that was my first time with you and with the person I formerly dated, really experiencing firsthand what it was like to see somebody addicted to something, and it was pretty surreal and eye opening.
Yeah. And I think it's, even though it's a very different thing, it's very much on that same level of alcoholism and those sorts of things. I mean,
Very much.
you know, some people don't seem to think it does, because I've had conversations with people like, well, it's just video games. Yeah, well, those video games that you sink yourself into, unless you are directly making money off of that, like as a professional gamer, a professional gamer will, they might practice 18 hours a day. Like that is their job. That's what they do. And that's fine. So that you can make your addiction into something. But the problem is most people, and even for those people, when it starts to affect the outside world, outside of that video game, that's a problem. Like for me, my marriage was basically falling apart around me because of video games. Because I would rather put too much time or more time into sinking it into World of Warcraft and raiding than into my actual life. So
Right.
it,
It's there's when the reality crosses over and fantasy becomes reality, that's when we know we're in a dangerous position.
yep.
Right.
So one thing, I know there's a couple things I'm looking at in chat right now. I know, so we'll cover that real quick. So Horton, I know that's actually something, the kind of that feeling of accomplishment is something that we will definitely be covering. That's actually one of the pieces that he brought up, which I felt was absolutely awesome. Um, then there are the games that require that type of time, because anything in real time, that because everything is real time in full, with full loot. Yeah, exactly. So, for instance, we kind of, part of this community plays a game called Star Citizen, and I may have mentioned it to you. I don't know if I have though, but basically it's a grind game. So it's a game where either you have two choices. I mean, it's a game still in alpha and whatever, so there's just a lot of mechanics that they still haven't figured out. But you basically have two choices. You can either grind your ass off, hours upon hours upon hours of time to get cool things in the game, or you can buy it. So you can spend literally $1,000 real dollars on a ship in the video game. And if you have the money for that, it's awesome. But if you don't have the money, basically it's gambling. If you don't have the money, then you end up sinking all of your time into it in order to get that. If that's your thing, if that game is your thing, like WoW was my thing for a while. I would spend hours upon hours either raiding or doing quests to get the cool new loot or things that I needed in order to make my character better and those sorts of things. It's hard. And either you're sinking your time into it or you're sinking your money into it. And both of those are extremely dangerous. So there is somebody in chat who actually has kind of firsthand experience working with the company who made World of Warcraft, Blizzard. And he said, one of the things I learned working at Blizzard was the game mechanics follow a nearly identical setup to slot machines in Vegas, which makes complete sense. Flashing lights and music when you level up. And other examples are psychological tactics to keep you wanting more. Like that's the only game that I've played. I've had certain games where there's kind of that addiction piece to it, but it hasn't been anything that is to that extent. And I 100% support what he said, because that's exactly what it is. It keeps you wanting more. And like, I can go to Vegas and I can play these games and never actually have a problem. I'm not an addict when it comes to gambling, but when it comes to sinking your time into something in the comfort of my own home, I'm screwed.
Do you think the difference is between that? I'm intrigued by the point you just made. What do you think the difference is between going to Vegas or going to a casino, going somewhere where you can, big flashy lights and all of that jazz, right? Versus and not having an issue with it, versus playing a video game in the comfort of your own home. I think the
For
difference is
so personally, I think a lot of it has to do with the money. I'm very big on not just wasting a ton of money. So I'll sink $15 into a game and sink all my time into a game. But to sink $20,000 into a casino is not something that I'm willing to do. But I can understand where the mechanics fit into both. So somebody who's not as kind of reserved when it comes to their finances, or even somebody who is an addict and maybe just doesn't have that control over it, I can very, very much see where the problem would be.
absolutely. And yeah, and that's an angle I didn't really think about was, I guess, or even, football squares and the different betting brackets, things like that. Um, I think about the differences between the two,
Yeah.
you
And,
know, if at all. I think it
and
comes down to as well, like you said, depending on how deep your pockets are and how free you can be with spending, right?
mhm.
That's one thing. And what might be financial to one person can be time to another, right? That different mindset of value, right? What we have.
Yeah. And one thing that actually that Warrior brought up was all I see is Tim's comment. Sorry, I'm late. I love you. One thing that Warrior brought up was Vegas. You can leave a personal game, like a video game. You can't. Like, it's
Yeah,
there. It's kind of like the idea of smoking versus a food addiction. It's the same thing to a certain extent, but food you can't get away from. I mean, yes, you can get away from
absolutely.
your computer if you really wanted to. You could sell your computer, but especially in times like this, there's people working from home. I spend all my time on my computer because either I'm doing things for the stream or I'm doing things for work or something. So there's always that urge to move myself into playing video games. I mean, I'll 100% admit it. On slow days at work, there have been times that I will pull up a game and start playing. And it's not something that should happen. But
Right.
it's me recognizing that there is, or at least having the ability to recognize that there's some sort of addiction there. And thankfully, I've been able to put myself in the right place where I recognize that. I'm able
How
to
did
at
you do
least
that?
relatively pull myself away from it.
How did you how'd you do that?
I think it's me just looking at the signs and saying, this is what triggers me. Instead of focusing heavily on, okay, well, I have an addiction, and once I recognize that I have an addiction to something, it's more along the lines of me saying, or sorry, me not saying, well, it's not really that big of a deal. And I don't really have to worry about that. It's not affecting anything. It's literally me going through and saying, I have an addiction, or I'm seeing those signs of me potentially getting into the realm of having an addiction with this game or this item. Now I need to learn, what is it? What am I doing? And what can I do to pull myself out of it? That's a really, really hard thing to do.
It is.
You
It's
know,
a dangerous zone to be in. You can get lost quickly.
yep. And I think that the hardest part is really being able to start off by identifying that. And I mean, it's you know, you can't put the relying on that on somebody else, but I'm at a point where I have somebody in my life who can actually not, she won't just come over and say, "Hey, you have an addiction, get out of my house." She'll actually have a real conversation with me, and she'll point it out in certain ways where it's not damaging, and it's not me now sinking myself, like with, with my ex. It was me sinking myself further into it, because I'm like, well, now I just don't want to deal with you, because you're sitting here attacking me. I don't want to deal with you, so now I'm going to sink myself even further. When I
I
first
remember
started
that.
when I first started streaming a couple years ago, one of the reasons I started streaming, I played the Division, and I would literally, and you and I have had conversations about this. I would literally sit there from the time that we would put my oldest daughter to sleep. I would go downstairs immediately and play video games, and it was my escape from her and my escape from the situation that we were in. And it was, I didn't recognize that at the time, but it was most definitely an addiction. Once I actually, and it was funny because once we went through the divorce, I moved in with my parents for a short time, and it was the same thing. Like, moving in with them made me realize the addiction, because now I was spending all my time in there. Yes, I had problems going on around me, but I was spending all my time in there, and I was playing video games, and I was dealing with X, Y, and Z, and not dealing with the other issues that I was going through. Now, I didn't have to look for a job. I didn't have to do all these. It's not like I had lost my job and now I'm, scraping by. I didn't have to go out looking for somebody else. But the problem was I was still trying to escape just everything, all the emotions. So I've been able to, since those moments of really recognizing what am I doing and how am I doing it, being able to really tie that back into what can I do to fix the problem once I recognize that it's actually there. And it's very easy for me to slip back into an addiction to a video game, which is one of the reasons when it comes to my streaming, I'm very much I do my best to diversify the games that I'm playing. And I, like, right now I play a lot of Apex, which I mentioned earlier is a first person shooter, since you don't play Apex specifically. It's a first person shooter. So I go through and I play a lot of Apex. I have to pull myself away from doing that, because even last week we were playing every single night from the time that the kids would go to bed till like 2 o'clock in the morning. We were playing Apex. So I started pulling myself away from that, knowing that, hey, I have more important things to worry about, and the video game and just playing the video game is not something that I should be focusing on.
The
So
debut behind us.
what was that?
The cat's chiming in.
Oh yeah. So let's see. Z has a question for you. Says, where do you think the line is between healthy gaming and addiction? That's a great question.
Absolutely. It is. It's a phenomenal question. So the line, I would say, is kind of going back to what we said earlier, when reality starts to become kind of a faded thought, and the fantasy starts to become the reality. So, meaning when you're engaging in conversations and you're not able to actively listen, be present, and in the back of your mind, you're just thinking, gosh, I can't wait to get home and I can't wait till this person stops talking, or whatever variety of things you might be thinking, focusing on that game or focusing on something you missed. When those thoughts start to intrude a reality, that's one of the first signs, in my opinion, when we need to say, hey, wait a minute, we might have something bigger going on here. Or another one where that line could start to get hazy would be start to miss, work for it, sleep. And it's one thing to stay up late, a new release of a game, right? New extension. You
Take
stay up,
three
you're
days off.
excited, right? Right. You're excited about it. You want to, stay up and play. What? Fine, right? But then it starts to become excessive, right? And hygiene's another one. You're staying in your pajamas. That's okay from time to time. But if we're talking 2, 3 days or the entire weekend, you've not showered, you've not put in deodorant, right? You're not changed your clothes. Now we have a different problem, and we got to start looking at how healthy is this for us, and diving deeper too. What's underneath all that? There's a whole treasure chest of things we haven't talked about yet, and we'll get there. As to what fuels this, um, because why do we want to escape our reality? A lot of reasons. Right? There's a lot of things that push people into that direction. Um, so I think those are just a couple things, again, in my opinion, that start to become like just indicators for, all right, we might have something going on. I'd love to hear if anybody else some thoughts. And again, I can't read the chat because it's tiny font, but Randy, if you can help me.
Hmm. Perfect. Um, so one thing that I know, and this was actually brought up too, quarantine and COVID and kind of being stuck at home and stuff like that, at least on a modern sense, has really created a problem, I guess you could say. Not only, the normal issues outside of, going on and the normal problems that we already have, but now people are kind of stuck inside with nothing to do. And I think that's perpetuating the problem that we have right now. Where, for instance, kind of going into some stats that I found, Steam. Steam is one of the biggest platforms, anywhere, biggest platforms of video games. They currently have 30,000 video games available on their site, with 25 new games being released every single day. So if you look at the options that you have, 47% of game developers sell their games on Steam, and that's just Steam. That's not, the other platforms that are out there. That's not, just the individual games. That's 30,000 plus video games on one platform. Some of them are free, some of them are cheap. It's very easy for people to just sink themselves. Back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was video game addiction, but it was a much smaller problem because, one, people had that perception of video games. Nowadays, with pro gaming and esports and whatever, video games are kind of a little bit more acceptable, but there was also less option. If you were addicted to a game, you were addicted to these 5 games, Baldur's Gate or something along those lines. RuneScape. Yeah, yes, in 70s was Pong. I mean, there were people that were addicted to Pong, and that's fine. But it was still a single game. You had
Forgot my favorite, Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah, and yeah, in Mortal Kombat. You had such a much smaller selection of them, it became less of a problem. But nowadays, you're talking 30,000 on one platform with 25 new games being released every day. I go into my web browser, and it shows, I think it's 4 or 5 games that are free for this week that Steam has available, or this platform called Epic has available. And they say, here's a game, try it. We have way too many options, and it's so easy, especially with everything going on right now, it's so easy to become addicted to these games. So kind of number 2, now that we've talked about kind of escaping, temporarily being able to escape your problems and just getting away from everything, the second one that he had brought up was the fact that these games are so social. So one of the things, like World of Warcraft, why would I go outside and try to make new friends when I can go into a video game? I've met some pretty cool people from not only streaming, but I mean, even just going into something like Apex, playing the game for a game or two, having somebody who actually, just game-wise I click with, and then we keep playing. And now I've made a new friend. Why go outside and try to make a new friend? I mean, especially as a kid. It's even harder as an adult because where are you going to meet people? You're gonna meet people at work, and you're gonna meet people at the bar. Well, I don't want to hang out with work friends. I mean, for the most part, I mean, I have maybe 2 people I'd be cool with hanging out. Like, my coworker Eric, who is in chat, and so of course I'm going to say something. Um, but hanging out with him would be fine. Hanging out with a few other people would be fine. But I don't want to hang out with people. Like, you know me, I don't like people. There's a reason that I stay at home and I stream.
This is true.
So one of the key things that he brought up in that kind of portion of the topic was the fact that it really helps you create a clean slate. So no matter what you've done, and this kind of perpetuates that whole idea of addiction. No matter, in World of Warcraft, I could go through and I could have a bunch of problems outside. I've now escaped those problems. Oh, well, cool. I went into this game, I screwed something up, and let's say, for instance, I accidentally took a piece of gear that somebody else wanted. Now all of a sudden everybody's pissed off at me. All right, well, what do? I leave the clan. I go to another clan where nobody knows me, and I have a clean slate.
I think something that's really important that I want to chime in on is when it comes to video games, like you said, for being a social outlet, there are times it's completely, I guess, acceptable. I don't even want to say acceptable. I don't like that word really, but it's, it is okay to play a video game, right? And to release some stress or to just, have an outlet. I think they're amazing for hand-eye coordination and definitely, thought processes, strategical thinking, things like that. Um, so again, I'm very pro video game and using it as, a mindfulness technique. Mindfulness doesn't have to just be yoga and traditional meditation. It can be playing a video game, and that's something I promote in the practice where I work. And I think it's perfectly fine to go out and use it to make friends. And you're right, it is very difficult as an adult to make friends. Right? It's not like it was when we were kids,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is so driven, and especially this year, right? We've all kind of been funneled into staying at home and finding means and ways to not feel so isolated. Um, Social media and outlets has never been more important. And I have to tell you, I've encouraged people to find outlets, so many different types in these past few months. It's been really unique and a lot of fun, actually. And seeing how many, I've learned a lot more people play video games than I knew. And it's been a real treat listening to how they've been utilizing it to help process their emotions related to COVID and whatever else might be going on, right? Um, and make sure I kind of tap into that a little bit. It's definitely a good way to escape reality, right? It's just we always have to be careful, as with anything, when those lines get hazy and whatever it is we're dabbling into starts to become bigger than our reality.
Mm-hmm. And I
So
think,
yeah.
because so you kind of asked the question earlier, kind of what made me realize, my addiction, and how was I able to come through and actually figure, all that type of stuff out. I think that's where it really ends up coming in. When I would much rather play video games than do social things. I mean, nobody wants to go and excuse me for saying this because my family is here, but nobody wants to go and hang out with their family for 10 hours.
If
They
I'm there,
I definitely don't want to then. So but like, family, like big family parties for the whole, collective family. You know, that's fine going there and actually, spending time with them. But most people dread that type of thing. But when you would much rather go out and play a video game than spend time with your family or even your immediate family, and your relationships start to suffer, and you start to choose video games over just normal life, that's when it's an addiction. So I think the important thing is being able to figure out what are the signs for me, because everybody's different. It's like drugs and alcohol and all that. Everyone's different on how it's impacting them and impacting their life. But it really comes down to being able to not only identify that, hey, I have an addiction, but now figure out what are my triggers. I know that I cannot go through and I cannot play World of Warcraft. And because I cannot play, like I'll even to this day, I'll think about it and I'll be like, hey, it'd be kind of cool to go through and see what's changed. But then I have to stop myself and I have to say, is it worth it? Because if it's worth it, great, I'll go do that. But then I have to know what the consequences of going back and actually playing a game like that would be.
Right.
So let's see. We have a question in the chat as well. How would you, this is for you, Stacy, how would you suggest bringing up the topic to someone who has an addiction?
Tricky. It's always a tricky one. First things first, you never want somebody to feel like they're getting an intervention, right? You see it in movies, or you'll hear people talk about, oh, they need an intervention. You have to be real careful with stuff like that, because you're automatically going to put someone on the defense. I would say one of the best things any one of us could ever practice in our life, we see somebody who is struggling with something, is to ask them open-ended questions. Okay, open-ended questions are questions that don't have a yes no response. So, meaning, hey, could you tell me more about why you like this game so much? What is it about this game that makes you want to play it all the time? Right? When you ask these open-ended questions, it actually allows that person to disclose to you exactly what it is that brings them in. And from there, you might find your opening to what it is that's drawing them in. Maybe they're feeling isolated because they're dealing with judgment or low self esteem, self worth, negative self talk, and they feel accomplished in the game. Right? Because video games can do that, right? They're great for anxiety, especially depending on the game you play. You go in, you accomplish a task, you win. Oh, right? Um, can also work against anxiety too if it's a game that raises it.
Mm-hmm.
But open-ended questions and just actively listening. Meaning, you ask the person the question, sit there and let them talk and wait. Count to 3 after they're done talking and wait to see if they have anything else to say. And then say, huh. Ask them another question. Engage in it. I would say anytime you want to approach a topic with anyone to where you feel there's some type of abuse, misuse going on, or just in general, right? Open-ended questions. I wish we practiced more of that.
I think one of the things too that was brought up in that TED Talk, because he kind of went through everything and then really dove into how to correct the problem. I think a lot of the things are from an early age. Since we're on that topic, I'll touch on these. And I think the third one is kind of fits really well into this question. One would be limiting the use of technology at a younger age. So, parents nowadays focus on, here's the iPad, go do something, instead of spending time with their kids. I'm a parent, I'm guilty of it. I have my days where I do that. I throw my kids in front of the TV and I say, have at it. But that is kind of helping that situation of being now addicted to technology, which could then turn into being addicted to video games or something like that. Most people who are addicted to video games struggle with something. And a lot of times they struggle primarily with making new friends, whether it's social anxiety or something along those lines, depression or whatever. And then the third one, and we can kind of touch on these in a little bit if you want to as well. The third one would be not punishing them. Yes, you're addicted to video games. I get it. But not punishing the person for being addicted to video games. Coming from a place of compassion and encouraging them and trying to, in a way, help them realize I have an addiction instead of you have an addiction, get out of my house, I don't want to see you anymore. Well, now they're just going to sink themselves even further in because now you're punishing them and now they're like, well, what's the point? Because somebody who suffers from depression isn't going to care that you're, and most of the people who have, who have the video game addictions, I don't know specific numbers, but I would say most of them suffer from depression of some kind. And all you're going to do is you're going to help them sink deeper into that sort of thing. And that's not
Sure,
good.
it's gonna
That's not,
prove why.
yeah.
It's gonna prove why they wanna run away from reality because society can be pretty cruel. It can.
Yep. Um, okay. So did you want to dive into any of those three?
I I'm open to anything,
Okay. All
really.
right. So
I'm just
well,
excited to be talking about this
perfect.
stuff.
So number three that he had discussed, was, the fact that video games provide a challenge, and they're a challenge that we don't get in normal life. So I can't go through and I can't, get that satisfaction of completing this quest, or I can't get the satisfaction of, you know, beating this level or doing a speed run. And now all of a sudden I've spent hours upon hours and I've been very addicted to this game. Well, now I can beat this game in 13 minutes, which is now a world record. Or, that's, kind of a stretch, but it's the same basic idea where it provides a challenge, and somebody like myself who says, my goal is to complete this. Now all of a sudden I'm screwed because my focus is on completing that objective. Well, that objective, like World of Warcraft, is like Z said, it's like a slot machine where there's more. Yes, I've hit this objective. Oh, cool, I won. Well, now all of a sudden, maybe I could win more. Oh, well, I won, I've just lost all my money, but maybe that next time is when I'm going to win.
The magic time, yep.
Exactly.
And I'll
So,
tell you what, I'm laughing because I play Yahtzee with buddies or
mhm,
Yahtzee with friends, whatever it is, and my husband will tell you, that, there was a period of time there where, it could have been a little questionable because I was giving in and I was buying things
mhm,
that I actually accidentally, and I swear this is true,
mhm,
um, I really did. I'm kind and nice, but I'm as kind as nice as I was. I bought $20 worth of gifts for my Yahtzee family, and so I got dice, and then they got free passes for things, and I wouldn't spend 20 bucks. $10 is kind of my limit, and it was truly an accident. But afterwards, I didn't feel guilty,
mhm.
and that for me, after a little bit of time, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I normally feel guilty if I spend money unnecessarily. Why did I do that? And I budget for things. And I thought, I got to take a bit of a break. And part of it too, I was excited because I kept coming in first place, second place. But then when I was in third place, I'm like, oh no, I know I'm capable of first place. I'm going to play to get first place.
Yep.
And Randy, you know me, and a few people here online know me. A couple of them, I think, do.
Mhm,
Um, that's not my nature. I'm personally competitive, but I'm not competitive with other people. If anything, I will challenge people to be the best version of themselves, but I will not compete with somebody. That's not my style. When my mind shifted and I started behaving that way, I remember Dan's my husband. I remember he and I being out to, I think it was Buffalo Wild Wings, and he was trying to talk to me. I'm like, wait. I'm playing Yahtzee. I'm in first place. Look. And he was just like,
yep.
so I want to point out too, and I can't see the app, but I think I saw something about I saw the word solitaire. So
Yeah, yep.
it made me think about this too, and what you just said. It could be anything, any games. It doesn't have to just be like online games. It can definitely be something else, right? Any type of game, anything really. Drink too much water, it's bad for you. You get an overactive bladder.
Mhm. Yeah,
right?
the question was, but is video game addiction for interactive, or games like solitaire too?
Yeah,
Yeah,
both.
anything.
Both.
Yep. Once it starts to affect the outside world, or even you emotionally, it doesn't even have to be the outside world. It could be you emotionally or physically or just internally. That's where you start to realize it's an addiction.
Absolutely. And I'll be very transparent because I'm not somebody, in my line of work, individuals that I'm lucky enough that they bring me on their journey, I'm very transparent with them. I'm not the type of therapist that hides and tries to pretend that my life is so, a perfect box. Nah, I'm pretty real with everyone. And I'll tell you guys, when I was going through that bout with Yahtzee at Christmas time, it was a super busy time of year for me at work, because of a couple different roles I have there. In addition to, I'm taking in everybody's stuff. So when people don't want to spend holidays with their family, take that in, right? And times however many people, or if they're dealing with grief and loss, if they're dealing with any other type of addiction. In particular, I work a lot with food addictions. Um, that's all mine, right, to take in. And one of the things I need to do is make sure I have appropriate self care after I'm done working. And I do a pretty phenomenal job, but my counseling side of everything was great, but in my administrative side, things were starting to get a little out of control. I couldn't quite get my hands on everything I needed to keep up with. And I was like, "Well, there's an imbalance. What am I gonna do? I'll just check out and do something mindless that I'm kind of good at," and that was Yahtzee. And I got sucked in because I was accomplishing things, right? I was hitting first place, second place, third place, and in other spots now too. And I'll tell you guys, I'm in 8th place in my family, and I'm totally cool with it. I like holding down 8th place. Not spending any money. I'm rocking it. Um, and so again, just sharing that because I did have something else that was driving me to pay and spend money. I was looking to have a sense of accomplishment, right? My issue was anxiety, know, different than depression, but it was still, I needed
Hmm.
to feel that validation.
It's just as bad.
Is is so I'm definitely someone who I'll err on the side of anxiousness before I will depression. And some people are more hardwired for depression versus anxiousness,
Hmm.
right? But really, you have one than the other.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's amazing the stuff that will drive us to do things, and whether or not we're able to catch that. Right? And like I said, I remember Dan and I driving home that night from Buffalo Wild Wings, and I was like, didn't I feel guilty about spending that money? That was different, right? Um, I'm somebody who's real quick to be reflective on my. It's part of my self care routine is to reflect on my day. How did it go? Will I do better tomorrow? How was I my best version of myself today? Right? That's part of my stuff. So that came up in that routine. I'm thankful it did because it provided me that moment to go, oh, wait a minute.
Mhm. And I think that's the important thing, and that was kind of my aha moment when it came to WoW and any other video game addiction I've had, is having that moment where somebody points something out and you all of a sudden say, that's not right. Like, for me, that's not right. You have people like, as I mentioned, Star Citizen. You have people who are happy to drop, and it doesn't affect them to drop thousands of dollars on a video game. But if I drop $1,000 on a video game and I don't feel guilty about it, and now all of a sudden I'm affecting my finances outside of that game, that's when I really need to start. Even if I'm not affecting my outside finances, but it's not me, I have to take a step back and say, Tim. Tim's feeling attacked now, by the way, because he spends thousands of dollars on the game. But here's the thing, so you can do it. And so you being able to do it is great. Me being able to do it is really, that's when I have to be able to take a step back, and I have to recognize that, and I have to say, this isn't who I am. Am I comfortable with making this change? Going ahead in Apex and spending $40-$50 on the game, that's a stretch for me generally too. But doing that is much more within my own personal realm of being okay,
Right.
versus thousands of dollars.
I'm curious from everyone that's here, how do they determine, what's too much and what's just enough? Like, what do you guys decide?
Yeah,
When do you
so
decide?
like where do you draw the line? Because everyone's going to be different. You're gonna you might make $120,000 a year, but you might be able to say, yeah, you know what? Spending any money on a video game isn't worth my time. Outside of buying the initial game. And then there's people who say, I make $120,000 a year, I can go ahead and drop, $30,000 in a game in a year, and I'm comfortable with it. So it's a great question. How do you decide where that line is drawn? Is it, I have extra money laying around? Is it I budgeted for this? Or is it, I just throw money out there until, as long as I can pay my bills, I'm good. Everyone's going to be different. Let's
Hey,
see.
that's a really important point, Randy, because there, some people, right, might spend a lot of money on Starbucks, get coffee. Somebody else might say, hey, you know what? That $30 a week you're spending on coffee, I'm going to spend that $30 on something else.
Hmm.
Okay? And I think it's a matter of just again what we prioritize, and what we prioritize is based off what we place value on. Right? And the cool thing about video games, when it's done, healthy, is that it is a space for people to make friendships. Right? I have a good friend of mine who plays D&D, and he introduced me to Fibbage and a few other things
Hmm.
online, and it was so much fun. We played with a friend of his that I've heard the name a couple times. It was cool to finally like play a game with them. I was like, this is really neat, right? And I can't say that I'm friends with that person now, but I would definitely not shy away if I saw them online. I'd be like, hey, remember me? I'm the Fibbage girl, right? Um, I,
Which
I
one?
think that which
if you
one?
if yeah, if you were to go and say something like that, I'd be like, wait, which one?
I'd have to probably disclose. Yeah, I'd probably have to identify myself. But you know what I'm talking about. I think it's important to, too, that everybody, somebody might spend money on one thing and say, well, I don't want to spend my money on coffee. I'd rather spend my money on this, right?
Hmm.
Whereas some people like going out to the bar and hanging out on the weekends. Somebody else might say, hey, I want to put that money towards a video game and make some friends.
Yep.
Right?
So I think overall the common consensus in chat is kind of what we've already kind of discussed, about where do you decide where that fine line is. Really, it comes down to your own personal finances. You know, are you? Let me see. Too much is when it causes me to struggle with real life finances. That's definitely a problem.
Yeah.
Um, and then Eladoc actually brought up a good point. If you can afford to spend it and it doesn't affect the rest of your life, then that's fine. If it prevents you from paying bills, then it's a major problem. And
Excellent,
well,
excellent point.
I would add to that, and on top of that, if it creates emotional angst also. So if it is affecting you, not only your bills, but if it's affecting your who you are, whether emotional, I muted myself, whether it's emotional or whatever, that's where you end up getting into the problem. So I think as long as you can stay above that line, I think that's where that line is. Once you start to get down there and say, I can spend $50 on a game, but if I spend $51, then I'm like, that's where you draw the line right there. Your $50 is where you draw the line. And if you stay below that, then to you, it's acceptable. You start to go above that, then you could potentially start getting into more dangerous territory, either of addiction or of depression or of just spending too much money. Which
Absolutely.
in turn will end up creating more problems. And it's so Z brought up a good point. Emotionally, I can't play League of Legends or similar games. The toxicity is so high, and I angst to a point it spills over into real life. Like that's exactly right. So if you're playing a game, like that's where when it comes to games you can play versus games you can't play, I think it's a great point that if that game stresses you out, I can't play things like Call of Duty. I mean, I could do like Warzone or something like that, but when you start to add in the toxicity of the community, the division is a prime example, and it's kind of one of those well-known type of things. It's like the poster child of toxic communities. When you start to get into the PvP element, the toxicity of that game is astounding of how many people just attack. And I'm talking not just, hey, you're stupid, I just killed you. No, it's personal attacks. I don't even know this person and they're personally attacking me.
So like cyberbullying.
It's basically, yeah, it's like continuous cyberbullying. And League of Legends the same type of thing. It's one of the most popular games in the world. Dota actually is, according to certain numbers, whatever that I found, Dota is the #1 game in the world. It's the same type of thing. It's the same thing as like a League of Legends type of game. And I don't know how the community is there, but League of Legends is something like Z that I cannot go play because there's too many people. If you mess up one time, you're basically being cyberbullied for the next hour at least for
So
no
what
reason.
is it? So help me, and I guess maybe even in the group, like let's start this conversation because I think this is a fantastic topic. Um, you go in there and you're like, "Hey, I don't like how this feels. You're bullying me, and I'm not escaping here to be bullied." What is it in your mindset that shifts that tells you this is enough? I'm not going to put up with this. Versus, no, no, we're going to go head to head. Tell me what that translation is like, and then if anybody else wants to chime in on that.
I think for I think it comes down to just what kind of person you are. If you're a person who, I mean, there's plenty of people that I've watched on Twitch who are very aggressive. They're those type of people who are, you know, they die and all of a sudden they're throwing their keyboard or taking their monitor and chucking it out, like literally chucking it out a window. There's one guy who's famously known for taking his keyboard and breaking it over his monitor because he lost a game. So I think it's those types of people or the people who are just, I don't want to say naturally just cyberbullies, but they're the ones who have kind of been conditioned to be cyberbullies, I guess you could say.
Okay.
Versus somebody like myself that's much more, at least to a certain extent, much more passive. I have no interest in going through and cyberbullying somebody. I'm much more on the level of being an advocate for, mental health and whatever, and not being that person that's going to sit here and attack you. I will defend myself if it gets to be a point, but I also have been able to recognize, and I think a lot of people in the chat can recognize too, the ones who are simply just trolling. They're just trolling you to get a reaction. And if you give into that, I have an older clip. I don't even know if it's still on here. I have an older clip though here on Twitch that there's a guy who came over and started like laughing at me. Never saw this guy. This is when I was playing the division, and was laughing at me and was, trying to kill me and whatever, and making fun of me. So I ended up beating him, and I ended up killing him and whatever. And I'm like, that was enough for me. Some people, unfortunately, not only will attack back verbally, because this is over voice chat. Not only will they attack verbally, but now they will be the one going and bullying that person. And I think it has a lot to do with your upbringing. It has a lot to do with just who you are as a person. And it to me, it really identifies who you are. Because if you're the kind of person that wants to go ahead and just, oh well, this person did it for me and now it's eye for an eye. I might believe in eye for an eye in certain circumstances, but I also have to weigh the option of, is it worth it for me to now put myself at duress over doing this, or is it worth it for me to just let it go and move on? And most of the time I err on the side of just let it go. It's not worth it. If I can run away and I can just leave the situation, great. Sometimes I'll muster through and I'll say, okay, well, I'll suck it up until the end of this game. I'll wait so I never have to talk to this person again. Because it's that temporary thing. Most of the time, it's a temporary game. It lasts maybe 20 minutes on a lot of these multiplayer games. So it's not like I'm stuck in the server with somebody. And if I'm stuck in the server, I log out, go into another server, and I'm good. I never have to see the person again, assuming they don't try to attack me, privately. Now all of a sudden it's sending me messages and whatever. And then there, if I feel it's worth it, I'll go ahead and just report the person or whatever. So kind of on that, did you have anything to say on that? Okay, I was gonna say it looks like you're thinking.
Was thinking, but no, I'm good. Just kind of listening and waiting to see if somebody else chimes in on something. Because so what I was thinking about, like with bullies. All right, I'll just say it. So, um, it's interesting how I think you attract two different kinds of people, right, online. Those who were bullied and want to come online and just escape the bullies, and then the people who I don't even think they're real bullies. I think they just
They're
pretend to be
cyberbullies.
bullies.
Yep.
They've got nothing better to do for whatever reason, and they just get a rise out of upsetting others, which is really not nice. Um, I'm fascinated by the behavior of people going on in cyberbullying, and not fascinated in a good way, fascinated and curious. I want to help that person heal so they stop doing it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not nice. And really, those cyberbullies, anybody who bullies, beneath all of that, is a lot of pain,
Yep.
usually. People don't bully just to bully. They bully to protect, to push somebody away. I'm not here to analyze everybody with a broad brush, but there's a lot of abandonment usually that comes from people who like to bully others, right? It's abandonment that's gone wrong, if you will, and never been healed. So, um, studies and research are what have kind of brought me to that conclusion, and experiences with work. Um, so again, I'm fascinated because I was raised with the sense of like video games being the safe outlet, the safe space to escape to, where there weren't bullies and everybody was nice. And I think that's one of the things that actually keeps me from like platforms like this, because I don't want to deal with negativity. I like positivity, right? I
Mm-hmm.
like to be a positive person. I like to attract that. Um, and I don't tolerate bullies very well. Know, so again, I think it's interesting, and you also set yourself up for being in a state of vulnerability in a platform like this too. You're gonna get those people who are competitive and not nice.
Yep.
Right? So that's what I was thinking.
And it's unfortunate too. It's unfortunate that we live in a world where, we're trying to fight for acceptance of all people. Some of us are. I would say the vast majority of people are fighting for acceptance of all people. But then there's still people out there who are just like, you know what? I have nothing better to do. I'm just gonna go online and harass people because I can hide behind a screen. I don't want to give props to the bullies in school, but at least they had the balls to go through and do it in person. I don't condone that at all. But the fact that you have somebody doing that, and then you have somebody who's willing to come through and just hide behind a screen and do more of it. There is so much cyberbullying, it is just a problem. And I think that goes into the entire idea of, if I'm going to get cyberbullied, I'm going to find an escape that is not going to bully me. And I think not only, you know, when it comes to everything that we've previously talked about, the amount of games available, the fact of, you know, all the problems that we have in the world right now, the fact that there's so much cyberbullying, people are looking for that escape. And all we're doing by the culmination of all of that stuff is just creating more and more and more addiction when it comes to games, or addictions even outside of video games. So either way, it's a much bigger problem. And I think it's something that people don't like to talk about, which is unfortunate, because I think it's something that if we can get behind it and we can do enough to correct the problem, we can stop basically a future of our kids coming on Twitch. And one of the reasons that Twitch is so big is the fact that you have what's called FOMO. I don't know if, have you ever heard the term FOMO?
I've heard the word, but I don't know what it means.
It's fear of missing out. So,
Oh, like yellow.
yeah.
Yellow and FOMO.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
Learning.
Exactly, yeah. So, but it's that type of thing where, you know, well, I can't play that game, so I'm gonna watch somebody else do it. But now, as a kid, as somebody that's my age, I'm almost 40. Somebody who's my age can go look at that and say, all right, well, I might suffer from FOMO, but, you know, at least I'm not going to grow up having that feeling of, well, this is how people act. But a 13-year-old kid who comes on her, and I say 13 because you're technically not supposed to be on Twitch younger than 13. A gorgeous almost 40-year-old. Okay, thanks, Tim. Love you. But a 13-year-old kid who comes on here and sees these people who rage quit and break their keyboards and are just dirty to other people. And on stream, they're going through and not necessarily cyberbullying, but they're verbally attacking people that they're playing with. They're growing up and they're seeing these sorts of things. And I think that's where you end up, like, when I was younger, we didn't have Twitch. We didn't have online streaming where I could just, you know, watch other people play video games. I had to physically play video games. We didn't have that interaction. Even though we might have had some multiplayer games, we didn't have all that interaction. But nowadays, because of the cyberbullying, that's where kind of our future is going to get. And this is one of the reasons I want to bring up this topic, because I'm afraid that our future is going to get to a point where we are basically a world from WALL-E. Or not from WALL-E, from is it WALL-E? Yeah, whatever the name of the movie is. The little robot.
WALL-E, yeah.
WALL-E, yeah. I couldn't remember if that was the name of the movie. But like, where, you know, you look at the humans on there and they're literally just like robots, essentially. Like, that's going, I fear that that's the type of thing that's going to be us, because we are not going to think for ourselves. We're going to be too hooked on the technology and, you know, the addiction of certain things. And that scares the hell out of me, because we're already moving in that direction. All right. So kind of on the last piece of the conversation that, you know, the TED Talk, one of the things that he brought up that I think this was probably for me the most important piece. I keep hitting the microphone. I gotta move this thing. Probably the most important thing for me was the constant measurable growth. So in real life, I have to wait a while to see a confirmation that I'm doing something right. In a video game, I could go out, do one quest, and I've leveled. And now all of a sudden I feel satisfied. And I'm like, oh, cool. I'm now another level. You know, I have that constant, as he called it, a feedback loop. It's just that constant feedback. I have that instant gratification all the time. And especially because nowadays we, you know, I don't remember where I heard it, but we basically have the attention span of a gnat. If it's not more than 140 characters, nobody cares. You know, when Twitter first came out and was like the huge popular new social media platform, and I was working in social, that's what everybody said. They were like, you know, if it's more than 140 characters, I don't care. I'm not going to go read a blog post. I'm going to go ahead, and thankfully we've reverted back to actually being willing to read things. But it was that instant gratification of I can post something and now I have thousands of people that can see it. Or I can search for something and I have that instant access to information.
What's funny that you say about that? I was in New York back. Undergrad is in journalism and communications, and the college I went to, the university, sent me to New York for a media conference. That's where I first learned about Twitter. I think it was like 2009. Anyway, I remember them actually saying something supporting what you just said, Randy. If it's too many characters, no one's going to read it. The
Mm-hmm.
shorter, the better. This is the way things are going. I remember sitting there going, "Wow, that's going to suck." Because how do you learn about a person? I mean, there's a time and a place for something to be short, but wow. I joked with my table mate at the time. I'm like, I could never do that. I need like unlimited, not limit me.
Yeah.
And Randy, you know me. I would never survive on Twitter. Like, oh,
No, not well.
me-
Remember, we tried it. Remember, we tried it. We tried the inner thoughts of Stacy or something like whatever it was. Yeah.
it didn't work.
Nope. Well,
It's one word, right? Or very verbose.
well, and then see, here's the thing. So I think they started to move away from that because they started to realize that people wanted the ability to write more. So now you could write one big message and then it was split into multiple messages. And then people started adding in like the long Twitter websites or whatever, where you would write something and then it would basically say, "Here's your article," put a link to it, and then person could click on that and it takes you to a whole post. Like now you're just doing an entire post. But it's still that instant gratification. It still is that, this is what I want and I want it right now. And that helps with, going back to the whole idea of World of Warcraft with their gambling situation and kind of where the mechanics come from. It's exactly that. I know that if I go into an area, I can now complete 20 quests. Well, by just completing one quest, I feel accomplished. By completing 20 quests, I'm now leveled. So now I feel accomplished 20 times and now one big accomplishment also. It's not like I've gone through and, I've played 50 things and now I only feel accomplished once. I feel accomplished along the way.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to point that out to like the positivity of video games, right? When, like I was saying, where I was kind of struggling with a work life balance, right? Um, needed that ability to feel accomplished, right? And that's where video games came into play for me. And that's not the first time I've reached out to video games. And Randy, you know my history with that.
Yep.
I used video games for something very, very important in my life, um, twice because it was right right tool that I needed, both situations, and it was incredible. I think there's a lot of positivity with video games too.
Agreed. Yeah, you have people out there who will say, "Well, video games made him do it." Well, no. There's much more to it. Being addicted or even just playing video games does not make you do something. There's much more to it. There's a disconnect between the video game and the reality.
Yes.
So
So
saying Call of Duty or Doom made somebody go out and kill somebody isn't a logical connection right there.
it is not, and psychologically, I think anybody in the psych world would argue that there was some other motivating factor in there first for that to happen.
Hmm.
There's a baseline of something else going on, some other neural instability
Yeah.
that provoked that
Yep.
action. And similar to kids, right? Kind of going way back to the beginning when you mentioned, you'll plop the kiddo down in front of the video game and say, "Play for a bit," right? It's your electronic babysitter, if you will. I'm guilty of that too with my stepdaughter. I will tell you, I would tell her, you have a half hour. I created limits for her because she has a bit of an addictive personality and suspected ADD, right? And so I knew that the video games would help what we suspected with the ADD. It would actually help that, not hinder it. It helped her focus. So I utilized it as a tool,
Hmm.
but I also gave her a time limit so she knew after 30 minutes, time's up. And I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to lie, it wasn't perfect every time. There were times I had to like shut it off. I'm like, you're done.
Yep.
Right? But I was also a firm parent and I didn't give in. I was like, no, 30 minutes is 30 minutes. Done. Um, so I think, again, video games can be utilized for a lot of positive rewards too, right? You and I have talked about your kids eating, right? It's your dinner, and then you can have more playtime or you can have more this, right? It can be utilized as a reward too for yourself, for kids, for anyone. And then again, like you said, kind of circling back to what you were talking about, society saying, oh, Call of Duty made the person, they know how they learned how to shoot guns on Call of Duty. I've shot guns and I've played Call of Duty, and Call of Duty
Completely
did
different.
not teach
Nope.
me. Yeah,
You could
they
play
are
Call of
not
Duty all
the
day
same.
long and have no clue how to shoot a gun properly.
Because I'll tell you, shooting a real gun is a way different feeling
Oh
than
yeah,
shooting a Call
it
of Duty
hurts.
gun.
When you first do it, it hurts. Call of Duty doesn't
That
hurt.
recoil's real. Right? So I think it's a shame that the video games get such a bad rap. And I don't know how everybody feels about this or if anyone deals with this, but does anybody struggle with judgment? Like, you don't want to tell people you play video games because you don't want to hear somebody pass judgment.
And I think that's a big problem, at least like for me, from what I've seen. I I tend to be hesitant to even tell certain people. I mean, there's certain people I say, "Oh yeah, I stream on Twitch." Because people look at that and say, "Well, that's not a real job." I mean, sure, it's not my full-time job, but for people who have that as their full-time job, there's quite a few. I mean, they're I'm sure going to be a few in here. I mean, Horton I think does full time, so it's possibly. Um, but I think there's that stigma of playing video games right now, and just video games are for kids. Okay, well no, something like Roblox is potentially for kids. Something like Minecraft could be for kids, but there's still a vast population of people who play those games. And
Absolutely.
the average video gamer is what, 37 years old? No, 34 years old. When you're talking percentages, I don't have the percentages here, but when you're talking percentages, you're talking, I think it said like 18% of people who play video games are under the age of 18. Here, I'm gonna bring that up real quick because I
That's a
think
low.
I think that's a really good thing to mention. Let's see.
Absolutely. I don't think younger kids don't play nearly as much as we think they do.
Yep.
It really is the adults. And again, in my practice, I encourage it. I'll ask people, "Hey, you ever thought about playing a video game?" Eh, Especially if I have somebody who I can see is balanced and kind of won't push it too much, right? When it comes to addiction, um, it's a social outlet. It's a way to feel accomplished. And depending on what the game is, of course, I always work it out with the individual. Talking about, what creates more anxiety
Yeah.
and what would promote you not feeling well, right? It's not just, yeah, go play video games. Oh no,
Yeah.
it's way more than that, right? There's a whole regimen I go through again because luckily for me, video games help save me too. So I have a fond appreciation for them.
Yep. So, um, I have up right here. So 2018, there were 2.2 billion people who played video games. Which, I mean, when you look at the entire population, it's still a small percentage, but that's still an astronomical number. Within that, and this is just the United States, 21% of people are under the age of 18. 18
Oh,
From 18 to 35 is 40%. From 36 to 49 is 18%, and then 50 plus is 21%. So the vast majority of people who play games are are adults from 18 to 35.
hey,
Mm,
double.
yeah, I
Did you
know
get
it's
that statistic?
this is from Tech Jury. Yeah, it's a little hard to see. Let me there we go. Should be able to see that, right?
You're asking the wrong person.
All right, there we go.
Somebody else want to chime in?
So that originally came from
There
statista.com.
it is.
Yep. So, I mean, it's fascinating to think that people talk about how, you know, well, games are for kids. Well, yeah, okay, games are for kids. But when you look at the stats, you really see that 18 to 35, 40% of that 2.2, and this was 2018, the 2.2 billion dollar or billion people that play video games, 40% of those are ages 18 to 35. I wonder how those numbers compare to ages of people having kids. That's true.
Yeah, it's a
So
real
so
good point.
so the ones who are parents versus, and there was something that I had seen.
Cats count as kids because mine are fighting behind me.
Um
So I apologize, everybody, if I keep
yes.
looking away.
Oh, you're fine.
It's my cat.
By the way, all the links that Warrior is putting in the chat, we are going to throw into Discord as well for anybody to take a look at afterwards if you wanted to. I'm going to create in the Discord, we have a we have a mental health section as well. So I don't think I have to get the permissions for you, Stacy, to be able to kind of take in there as well. If you want to, dive in, answer questions or anything. I don't want to put you on the spot because we haven't talked about this, but I think it'd be good for, for yourself and for other people to be able to kind of just not only get advice, like basic advice from you or anybody else that you deem, hey, this person would be a good resource, or even just from the community, because there's enough people around here who have plenty of experience when it comes to, not just video game addiction, depression, but bipolar and just a gamut of just issues. So mental health
Sure,
disorders or anything, within that realm.
sure. I
Like I said,
love
I'm
being an informationalist and just sharing. Love sharing resources. So yeah,
yeah.
I'm good with that.
So we'll probably create a links channel. So we'll throw articles up there for anybody to take a look at, from reputable sources. Don't worry, not from blogs, because .coms are not allowed to be used in master's programs apparently. Um, so let's talk briefly, since we still have a few more minutes. Let's go ahead and talk briefly about, and in your and my original prep, one thing that you kind of wanted to hit on was kind of talking to the chat directly and finding if anybody was able to take video games and take video games as a replacement, basically, for some kind of addiction. So let's say, for instance, you had an alcohol addiction and you turn to video games as that healthier solution. I mean, it may or may not have been a healthier solution, but at least taking video games and replacing it and getting away from the drugs or the alcohol or something like that.
Right,
Um,
right. And just to give everyone kind of a little bit of a background, when Randy and I were first talking about doing this podcast, we were kind of spitfiring ideas. And one of the things that came to my mind was again, I specialize in food addictions, or one of the things I specialize in is food addictions. Um, Grief and loss is the other specialization I have. And often, when it comes to food addictions, it's the hand to mouth, right? Kind of similar to smoking. I don't know. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, but
Mhm.
from what I'm told, it's that whole hand to mouth thing. Um,
That oral
and
fixation,
food,
yeah.
yeah, and food is quite similar.
Mhm.
So one of the things I focus on a lot with people is, well, how are you with video games? And because I am dealing with food addictions, I have to be careful because of transfer of addiction, right? We start out with different things, but we start out with games that will keep their hands very busy, right? So they're not eating
Mhm.
and things like that. So it is a I'll openly say it's a very delicate thing to navigate through. Um, that's where that question kind of for me came up. It's like who's been able to kick some other addiction and then move into video games, but keep it healthy.
Yeah.
If that
And
makes sense.
I think it's hard because at least with like so kind of going to your idea of replacing a food addiction with something like video games and having to keep your hands moving and whatever. I think it's really hard, especially nowadays, because there's a lot of blank time. So, for instance, you play a first person shooter or a battle royale game or even something like Star Citizen. So, in Star Citizen, let's use that as an example because there's quite a few people here that play it. In Star Citizen, you could hop into your ship, you could quantum jump your ship to another planet. But it's not like in some games where you go to a loading screen and now you're at that other planet. It literally takes you X amount of time to go a certain million kilometers. So you have to wait that entire time. That's an easy opportunity for somebody, let's say they have a food addiction or smoking or something like that, to say, you know what, I have a bag of chips right here. Let's just go ahead and eat while I wait. Or that's a great opportunity for me to run outside and have a cigarette. When it comes to battle royales, you go into a lobby and now all of a sudden it's, I've ended my game. Let me queue up for the next game. I'll go outside, have a cigarette, and then I'll come. By the time I get back inside, I'm good to go. So I think it's really, really hard right now to do that direct replacement if you don't find the right game.
Right.
And again, that's just my opinion from playing certain games. Something like scrap mechanic is something that is which again I think is a game that you would probably enjoy. It's a very slow paced game to a certain extent. I mean, there's not like big action. It's not a first person shooter or anything like that. You play a little guy that builds stuff. Um, but and it's like a survival type of game. But things like that, things like Minecraft, you can create something that is going to keep you busy. So Minecraft is a great example of that because and this is also where the addiction can come in too. If I'm building something like I get this grand idea to say, you know what, which I've done it, I want to build a pyramid. I'm going to load into a world. I'm going to pull out all these blocks and I'm going to literally just build a massive pyramid right in the middle of the island or the middle of this land. I now have something that is going to take up all my time. But that's a double-edged sword. I can very easily go ahead and replace that with a food addiction or smoking or even drug use or alcohol, whatever, because I've tricked my brain into thinking, hey, I don't need that stuff. I have this to stimulate my brain. But now I'm potentially getting into that unhealthy in the video game itself.
Right. I think what's interesting too, like something that just kind of popped up in my mind was, you know, so often people are like mindfulness, mindfulness, yoga, coloring. What else is there? The traditional home yoga, right? And I mentioned this early on too. It can be playing video games. It could be that, let's say you've got a parent who's very ill right? And you're just stressed because your boss at work is yelling at you too, and you're missing deadlines, and your parent is ill, and you're not comfortable enough to talk about this stuff at work. So you need an escape, right? And that becomes the video game,
Hmm.
becomes somewhere where you can just kind of go and be. And I think it's really important to have that ability to do that, right?
Yep.
It's just a random thought I had when you were talking.
Oh yeah. And this is kind of goes, the same idea of a random thought. I think one area where video games are healthy, because in general, I would honestly, even as a gamer, I would say video games are not a healthy thing. I mean, they're okay and they could be abused, but generally speaking, when it comes to like comparing to going outside and playing with your kids or going outside for a walk, they're probably not the most healthy thing you could be doing. You're sitting in front of a computer playing games. I mean,
But you're exercising the mind.
yes, and that's where I was. That's one thing I was about to say is you are exercising the mind if you utilize it correctly. Like my ability to focus can be honed a little bit better by playing a first person shooter or something that's a little more fast paced. Or I could play something like Da Vinci's House, where it is the entire game is puzzles and you have to figure out puzzles. That's exercising the brain. And that's great. Like that's kind of that healthy aspect of playing games. I think one of the things that, and my brother-in-law a while back when he originally got into playing World of Warcraft, who's the one that actually got me into playing World of Warcraft. I think one of the things was he utilized it because he lived here, or no, sorry, he lived in Virginia at the time, and his kids lived in Pennsylvania. So he utilized that as something to bridge that gap and actually spend time with his kids. Um, when they weren't there. The problem is that his kids eventually ended up stopping, and he dove himself much more into it. So it's one of those things where it can be utilized as a very healthy means of either coping or, like you said, when it comes to family or something like that. It can be utilized to cope. It can be utilized to bridge that gap with families and those sorts of things. But I think it's a very, very dangerous thing, only for the fact because it's very easy for somebody who has an addictive personality or somebody who is in a situation like we're in right now, where we're stuck at home, to start playing a game, even if they don't have an obsessive compulsive type of mentality, to start playing a game and then all of a sudden they realize it's been 36 hours and they haven't stopped.
Right. Right. And I think that's where, like games with time limits come into play, right? I remember
Mm-hmm.
Angry Birds. You had to wait so long until you got more birds or something.
Yeah.
There's
although
something like that.
although I will say, for somebody like me, if I have to wait in order to continue playing a game, I will stop playing it. There's so many mobile games that I've gotten into and so many games that I've played that are like, oh yeah, here's 50 energy, and now you've used up all 50 energy. Now you have to wait 3 hours and uninstall, because I don't want to be forced to not play the game. And I think that goes into my addictive personality. That's where I start to realize this is a problem. This is very much a problem.
Absolutely. So I want to show you guys something, and I don't know if anyone else plays this, but I play a game. See if I can get it to show. How do I make it
There you
there?
go. Oh yeah,
Uh-oh.
the
No?
yep. We saw it briefly.
Lumosity.
Yeah, yep.
Does anybody else play Lumosity? So
My
what I
mom
love
does.
about this game, she
Yep.
it, it does, again, I can't still showing Randy there.
There you go.
It measures your different abilities, right? It measures your um cognitive abilities. It measures tension and flexibility and problem solving skills. Anyone who saw that saw my math skills are the lowest.
Yeah,
It's real. It's
it's
real.
real.
I'm in the 26th percentile for my age math, but I am in the 84 percentile for attention
There you go.
since I'm doing the right thing for work. But no, I love Lumosity because there's a science behind it, and actually, if you play the game, um, like you do a workout and it has you play 5 different games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's also, and you can go into it and read about the science, right? From the lab to the app, the roots of Lumosity Games. So this is something where one of the games is based on 1974 Flanker Task, which was designed to help researchers investigate selective attention. It goes on, and I'll spare you guys, but it's a phenomenal game that actually you can play it for free or you can do a yearly subscription. I get the yearly subscription. It's my birthday gift every year.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I've been playing it, I don't even know how many years.
I
Many,
think, yeah.
7, 8
I was gonna say, I think since you and I first met, like
Yeah,
right
actually,
when we worked together, I think that's when right about the time that you started playing it,
so that'd be what, 2007 or 8,
something like
I
that. Yeah.
think. Yeah, I've been playing this game a very, very long time. It says I should work in law. Healthcare is like low on
No,
the
I
pole.
could. Yeah, no, I couldn't see you in law. Nope, not at all.
I could. It'd be amazing. No, and it's funny because again, I've been in healthcare over 20 years now. But anyway, I digress. There's some games out there that can actually help, and when it comes to again things like, and no, we're not talking about depression, but ADD in particular, individuals who have ADD, ADHD, depression is usually tacked on there as well. In the world of mental health, the depression's kind of like the little tag along to that one.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's certain games out there that can actually help people. It just, again, like you said, it's a matter of finding a balance and whatnot. So
Yep. ADD poster child here, not you. Somebody in chat.
I get
So
a magazine. The
was
way,
that?
hold on, I get a magazine that's really awesome called Attitude, and ADD is in capital letters, and then Etude. It's awesome. So for anyone who's dealing with that or knows somebody, that magazine, that website, a good one.
I will definitely have to check that out. I've never been officially diagnosed with ADD, but I'm pretty sure I'm like on that spectrum. Um, one thing that,
Even if you don't have it, just learning coping skills.
yeah, yeah, and then that's the thing. Like, I had a conversation with a former coworker of mine, who was diagnosed with ADD, and she was kind of like talking about it, some of the things she dealt with. I did a ton of research, and I'm like, this explains a lot. So instead of going to a doctor and getting officially diagnosed and whatever, I was able to basically just learn enough to be able to cope with it. I mean, there's still a lot of moments that I squirrel off. You know that. I don't pay attention enough, and I think me spending a lot of time in front of computers doesn't help. I will say that. It does not help. But I also have an addiction to computers. I'm on it all, like, basically every day. All right, cool. So the final question is from Eladoc. This is a question for you, Stacy. What are your thoughts on the lack of competition allowed for kids these days, and the uptick, and kind of how that compares to the uptick in cyberbullying?
Mm.
I love that
Or
question because it's gonna make her think.
So,
But
Randy, while I'm thinking, and I have a lot to say on that, and
mhm.
I'm like, time do I have?
You know what?
So,
Honestly, take whatever time you need. I know we said about 2 hours, but if you want to go and on a rant for the next 30 minutes, I'm perfectly fine with that.
it would be, but my notes for work and my bedtime and tomorrow
Oh
morning
yeah,
wouldn't be.
yeah, yeah, true.
See, right, I gotta have that boundary.
Yeah.
Randy, what are your thoughts on this?
So I think I am very much, as a parent, I am very much against creating a society and a future for my kids, at least, where they don't have the challenge, where they haven't failed before. I want my kids to fail, but by failing, they are learning. So I think by creating competition and not doing the whole freaking um what's it called, the yeah, thank you,
Oh,
participation
for
awards.
everyone.
Yeah, like, oh, all of a sudden, hey, I know you guys, there's 100 people, and I know we're only giving things out for the top 3, but you other 97 people, here, we're going to give you something. No, because you have to learn to fail. You should not be rewarded for failing. Your reward, at least to me, your reward should be learning from that mistake and figuring out what you need to do to get better at whatever it is. If my kid is on a baseball team, I'm good with, so we did baseball for my oldest daughter a while back, and it was not this past summer, or not this summer, but 2 summers ago, something like that. Yeah, and it kind of irritated me because there wasn't any real competition. So at that age, at like, 3-4 years old, there really isn't much of a competition. But every single child got a trophy. And to a certain extent, because there wasn't any actual competition, I'm somewhat okay with that. But if you start to add the competition in there, which I am 100% for, that's when you need to start to take that step back and say, are we going to reward for this? And I think because kids don't learn, and kind of how that ties into cyberbullying, because kids don't learn to fail, they learn that if you fail, it's bad. Failing is not bad. So all of a sudden, it's easy for a kid to say, oh, well, you failed. That's funny. And now I'm going to laugh at you because you failed.
Right, right. And oh, you and I have actually had this conversation back in the day when we worked together, and I think it took up an entire 8-hour shift,
Oh, it was easy. Yep, easy.
if not longer. Um, I have a very firm opinion on this. So first, I want to give a story. My stepdaughter has muscular dystrophy, form of it, and it affects her feet and her hands. And so to look at her, you'd never know. But when she runs, you can tell there's something a little different, right? And she's just not as strong as everybody else. She's 17 now and whatnot. We've always pushed her to run, to be like all the other kids. We don't give her notes in school to excuse her for things. We say, no, you get out there and you participate to the best of your abilities and have a good time above and beyond everything else. So I say all this. She joined color guard. In the school she goes to, they compete, and she was not great. She was not great at all, and she knew it. She's not a dancer. She's an artist, but not a dance artist. And anyway, I remember her falling, and she called me and she said, "I fell, and I'll be there in 5 minutes." And I was there, and she had 2 bandages on her knees, right, and tears coming down her cheeks, and all of the color guard kids were all huddled together. She's kind of like hiding like this at my door. And I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" She goes, well, I hurt myself. I go, "You stand up straight. Come on now. Have some pride. Right, you were out there. You tried. You had a good time, right? You have a good time?" And she's like, "Yeah, I did." She started to smile. And I said, "I don't know what you're doing standing here talking to me, but I think that group's waiting for you." She kind of just stood up. It was the sweetest thing. And Randy, you know Alyssa, but it was so cute because she stood up, shoulders went back, and it was perfect. And went up and she goes, just nodded to me and she took off and she ran to them, right? And I
Mhm.
was the proudest little stepmama ever. I was like, look at her go. My gosh, right? And she did, and she went in. There came a point where that wasn't fun anymore, and that the
Mhm.
girls were making fun of her because she was not good and she was falling a lot, but that's because disability she has prevents her from running normal. Right? And I remember Alyssa coming to me and just sobbing, and I said, "So I'm having you come home from these games and competitions now, and you're crying more than you're laughing. That's a problem." And she said, "I just don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "If you want to keep doing this, you're going to get your dad involved, because if you get me involved, I'm going to end it, because I'm going to be a protective mama bear, right?" The lioness is going to come out and protect my little pumpkin, because she was getting teased and people were talking about her. They weren't being very nice. And she's like, "No, I can handle this." Now I share all this because Alyssa didn't get any awards for participating. Right? When it came out to awards and recognition, she got nothing. What she did get was praise from her father and I, telling her, wow, that was pretty darn courageous of you to go out there and do what you did. Number one. Number two, you had to face people bullying you, people that don't know because your disease is invisible. Because for all basic means, she looks like a normal kid.
Hmm. You would never know.
Her, oh, you wouldn't. And her type of muscular dystrophy will affect her later in life. Um, and so, uh, anyhow, she didn't get anything except love and support from us. Now, if Dan and I weren't the people we were, that could have really crushed her. Right? But being the people we are, didn't, thankfully. Um, I think kids who get participation awards for participating, I think it's a fine line. I born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s. We didn't have that stuff. I remember climbing all the way in field day, climbing all the way to the top of the open, ringing the bell for the first time ever. I was in
Oh
sixth
yeah.
grade. Nobody noticed. And I'm like ringing that bell. I'm like, people, hello, I'm ringing the bell.
Hmm.
Nobody noticed. When I got down and the guy gave me my time and everything, and he's like, wow, you did really good. I'm like, thanks. You
Yeah.
know, and I was
You
like, go ahead.
I was gonna say, for something like that, like, to me, that's a moment where, at least somebody acknowledges it. You're not looking for the acceptance. You're just looking for somebody to acknowledge that you did something that was that was hard for you to do.
Yes. And and I'll tell you what, I walked away from that. And at 11 years old, I really did think this. Um, well, at least I know I did it. And that guy. Right. And true story, at 11, I was already thinking things that way. And I wouldn't say that I was brought up that way. My dad taught me, if you're gonna do something, do it right the first time. Don't slack off. That's the
Hmm.
environment I was raised in, right? So again, going back to kids and partition boards for participation, Randy, I couldn't agree with you more about the fact that we're not teaching them that failure is number one, okay, it's acceptable. Failure teaches you to think of a new solution in a neat, creative way. Right? But the scary, vulnerable part of that is if you are not surrounded by good value system in your own mind and good self-talk in your own mind, you have, let's say, a negative home environment, and that's going to destroy somebody.
Yep.
So I see the purpose in the participation awards. I understand it. Um, I really think it comes back to parents, aunts, uncles, the adults that support the kids, like mentors, just understanding how important it is to feed a child a positive compliment and let them know it's okay to fail because that's where better ideas come from. Find a new way to do it.
Hmm.
Right? And it's again our responsibility as adults to be able to draw on the importance of that and kids grow and move forward. I read something once somewhere a long, long time ago that said, when people somewhere, they'll cover, like if you have a really cool idea, you'll cover it up and hide it because you don't want anyone to see what your idea is, right? And I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but I've been in classes and I've even done
Guilty.
that too.
Many,
Yeah,
many times.
when I got a need, I'm like, I don't want to see it. I read this article. I was in college, and it said, "Let people see your idea, share it, because then someone else, yeah, they likely will take your whole idea or parts of it, and then they're going to either do it or do something different with it, and that's cool because then you can see it in action done their way. You can perfect it. You can come up with another idea.
Hmm.
You can grow." And they said, "So expose it, expose your ideas." And I thought, well, that's just the most unique idea ever. And so I did start doing that. And I'll tell you, I, as just a human, as a professional in whatever setting I was in, where I've done things like that, I've grown. And now, as a clinician, as a therapist, some therapists don't like to always share their ideas or their techniques. I'm the first one to tell anybody, well, I tried this, I tried that, because I want to just information share and help others because therapists, our role is to help other people. Right?
Yep.
Um, So yeah, I'm trying to make it a short version to answer. I think a lot of it comes down to the social support that kids have, and it's important for us as strangers that meet kids on the street, right? Um, just to remember what major impact we can have on them. Um, so I'm glad that my daughter didn't get recognized um, in in her flag stuff,
Yeah.
color guard.
Yep. Her flag stuff.
Glad flag stuff. I'm glad she didn't get recognized um, with some type of, in my opinion, meaningless "thanks for participating" award
Yep.
because it was my job as her parent to do that, to teach her, "Hey, man, you went out there," and I took videos of her when she first started twirling and then towards the end. I showed her and I said, "Here's your reward. You get to see how good you evolved."
Hmm.
And and she used to hate when I'd videotape her. She hated it. Right? I'm like, "Deal with it. I'm just doing it." So then I would do it in the house when she couldn't see me.
I don't doubt that.
Um, again, I think if a child doesn't have a good support system, that can be a very, very slippery slope. Um,
Yeah.
and we as just individuals who run into these kids, it could be the kid in the grocery store bagging your groceries, right? They might have just participated in something, gotten a participation award, had their parent make fun of it, and then we meet them, they're bagging our groceries. We either give them a hard time for it or we're nice about it.
Yep.
That moment, that interaction, child or human, um, can
It's
really just have such a strong impact.
Yeah, it's amazing how regardless whether the person is a stranger or not, you don't know. And I know this is kind of one of those big things that, a lot of people talk about. You don't know um what other people are going through. So
Absolutely.
by going in and just being an asshole to them for no reason, like going in and being angry at that bagger, they could have had something that just happened and they're literally just dealing with it right now. And your reaction could either make or break a situation for them.
It's true of all of us. I mean, if any one of us sit and reflect on life experiences, times where people were cruel to us or kind to us, right? Um, it can make or break us.
Yep.
And how hard is it just to, if you're having a bad day, how hard is it to say, you know what, this one moment, I'm going to be nice.
Yep.
You smile at somebody and you say hi. I mean, it's a little hard now with the masks on if you
Hmm.
wear a mask. Uh,
It's
I had
yeah, that
I
doesn't
had
work very
a
well.
I had a cashier at Kroger the other day. I said something and she couldn't hear me. She goes, I couldn't hear you, but I could tell you were smiling with your eyes.
Yeah.
And
Here,
I
let me take
smiled
my
even
mask
bigger.
off to talk.
Right? And then I think I was pretty much squinting because I was laughing.
Hmm.
And I thought I walked away and I was like, wow, that was a really nice compliment.
Hmm.
Oh, and I sat in my car for a second. I was like, it's really, really cool.
Yep.
Right?
And
And I
something,
thought
even
to my
something as simple as that made your day.
did. It felt good. And it just was nice. It was a nice feeling. And that's all all I took it for was that was really
Hmm.
nice of her to say that.
Yeah.
Right? And so again, how we interact with each other, how we interact with kids, especially is really important.
Yep. Yeah.
So
I struggle right now with my oldest because she's in that, and kind of my situation a little bit more, but she's very, very much in that age where she's looking for acceptance for everything. So she's looking for that, hey, I want you to recognize that I'm doing this. She'll literally come in my office and she'll say, "Hey, look at the way I was walking." And she'll go back and reenact it. Like, it's those stupid things, and I try as hard as I can. And this kind of goes not to the cashier thing, but previous to that, it really goes into, I want to do my best to um encourage her to be herself, but I also am kind of in that mindset of not everyone's going to pay attention to you. I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to pay attention to you for every single thing that you do. You don't need to get accepted or acknowledged for every single thing that you do, because that is a slippery slope, because now you're going to expect that moving forward, and then you're going to feel miserable when some guy over here doesn't notice you because you did something, and now all of a sudden it's the world's falling apart around me because mommy and daddy went ahead and paid attention to everything that I did. Like, that scares me.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that. When Alyssa was about 16, oh, 15, 14, 15, I'd say, he had a family that lived across the street from us, and the boy was a few years older than Alyssa, and he was out playing basketball with his guy friends one day. We're driving in the car, and I slowed down. I go, Alyssa, you see him out there right now? And she said, yeah. And I said to her, I said, you get a boyfriend one day and he says to you, I'm hanging out with the guys, I'm playing some ball. I said, he's really hanging out with the guys playing
Right?
some ball.
Yeah.
See it.
There's a very slim chance he's with another girl. He's actually doing what he's saying.
And so my parenting style, and again, Alyssa came into my life when she was 8.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a clue how to be a parent. I'm like, I don't know, I'm just gonna wing this and do the best I can. And I was realistic with her.
Yep.
Right? You're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some. There's times she loved it. There's times she absolutely hated it.
Mm-hmm.
And she would tell me, I don't like this. I don't like what you're saying. And I'm like,
Then
yeah,
you're
I don't
doing
know
your
what.
job right.
Right. And I actually told her that. I said,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to necessarily like me all the time. You won't. I'll always love you.
Yep.
I remember her thinking about that, and she's like, I'll always love you too. And I'm like, okay, then we're good. Right. And I think that's again part of parenting is just kids just being human, even not even just kids and parenting, really just being human is understanding the ebb and flow of mankind and being human,
Mm-hmm.
and paying it forward and putting forth your best effort, and especially on days where you're having a bad day. Why not, instead of continuing the
Yeah.
bad day? I had a thought the other day, and then I will let you guys go play marbles, promise. Because now like my second wind is coming, and now I'm like, oh.
Oh God. Okay. All
um
right.
but now I had a thought the other day. I was like, oh man, he's gone on. It slipped past me. I was doing a lot of work stuff, and I had some personal matters I needed to take care of too, some deadlines. And I stopped and I was like, no. I closed down all my browsers on my computer. I shut the computer down and I said, day's not gone. It's only 2 o'clock. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
O'clock.
Yep.
That was a chance where I could either in a bad mood because I got stuck doing a lot of admin stuff. Right. Again, I cannot stress enough out there. I love counseling. I love that. It's the admin work. I'm not so fun, not such a fan of the admin stuff, right? Paperwork. Paperwork. Uh,
Which is like 80% of your job when it comes to the physical actually doing stuff. Yeah.
it's all the billing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's not fun. Fun dealing with insurance. That's not.
No.
Counseling. That's fun. I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it was a moment where I had the opportunity to make or break my own day. And again, I thought to myself, it's just 2 o'clock, right? Just 2 o'clock. And I got up and I walked away and I did something to distract myself, reset,
Mm-hmm.
right, like you do on a, I'm gonna date myself here, like on a cassette player where you hit the button and it goes back to zero.
Cassette player.
Counter goes back to zero. You know what one of those is. Yeah.
Do I know what a cassette player is? Yes. I think everybody here at least knows what a cassette player is. Not everybody's
No.
owned one. All right. They're at least over 18. I'm sure they know what a cassette player is.
Hey, you know what? I know what an 8-track is.
Well,
Get any other 8-track?
only reason I do is because of my parents.
Used to play with the Beach Boys one. It was my favorite. Anyway, no, I think just kind of to close this out, I want to thank
Betamax.
everybody.
Somebody
I wanna
mentioned
thank
Betamax. I love it. All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
I want to thank everyone who tuned in. This was my first time ever doing something in this kind of a capacity. So, Randy, thank you for inviting me, and years of friendship and great conversation that could lead to something like this.
A lot of
And
ranting.
your trust. Yes.
So Is
Um,
no, good. Sorry, God.
I was going to say, but I just wanted to thank everyone who tuned in and the questions. Really awesome. I like the interactiveness.
Yeah. So I wanna leave this with a quote that actually Tyler put in chat that I've been waiting to say because I love this quote. But just so anybody who doesn't know, I know Warrior mentioned it in the chat a little bit ago. We plan on doing something like this. I keep saying first, the last Monday of every month. Kind of moving forward. There's at least going to be somebody here, whether that's Stacy or which I know the focus is to hopefully have Stacy on every month if she can fit it within her busy schedule. But either it's going to be her and I, or myself and somebody else, or the three of her and I and then somebody else. I know next month I have a plan with somebody else as well. So hopefully we'll be able to drum up more conversation, and hopefully you guys will join us. Let me know if you have, like I said, join the Discord. Let's basically have a conversation. If you guys have any recommendations on topics that we should cover, I'm very much just open to hearing what you guys have to say. And if you guys want to continue the conversation, I'll be throwing something over in creating a new channel there as well. It's the AOCast. So it's the group in Discord. I'll be creating a couple channels in there, and we can kind of have conversations beyond just this. But so to finish this out before we go on a quick break, Tyler, thank you for this, because he said there was a great line in the movie Batman Begins, which I never completely saw. Just saying, I hate Batman, but I love this quote. Why do we fall down? So we can pick ourselves back up, or so we can pick ourselves back up again. And that's exactly what failure does. It teaches us. So 100%
Like that.
right. 100% right. I mean, the reason that we fall down, the reason, and this can relate kind of back to the original topic of video game addiction. Some people go into that addiction, like myself, go into that addiction to learn from it. And if you come out of it and you haven't learned from it, you're doing something wrong. At least in my view, you're doing something wrong. You have to fail. You have to do things and learn. Even if you do things right, you have to learn what you did wrong. I'm getting my master's in project management right now. And one of the big things when you close a project is making sure that even if the project is 100% successful, you go through and you say, what went wrong? That way you learn from it. And you write it down, you make sure that it's documented, and you just kind of grow from that point. Because the first time you fail, it's going to hurt really, really bad. My 5-year-old falls, or even my 1-year-old falls. And I say, is anything broken? Are you bleeding? No? All right, you're good. No matter how much it hurts, you pick yourself back up. If things aren't broken, you're good.
It's funny, Randy, Alyssa, and I might have told you the story. Alyssa fell. I took her out on Valentine's Day. Dan was out of town, and I said to her, Alyssa, I'm going to teach you the fine art of taking care of yourself. Right? And she said, she was young. She was like 13. I said, we're going to go to Outback Steakhouse. We're going to get the surf and turf because she likes seafood. I eat steak.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we're going to split a meal. And we're going to have a Valentine's Day dinner, because if you want something, you need to go out and get it for yourself. Don't wait for someone to get you what you want. Take care of you, right? You want flowers, you buy yourself flowers.
Yep.
Don't wish for someone to do it for you. Do it for yourself. Anyway, I took her out. We had a great dinner, and she's like, wow, this really is amazing. And this is amazing. He was wearing this skirt that I wasn't such a fan of because it was a little more adult for her than her age, but whatever. She fell. She was playing on the curbs, and she went down, and I was like, oh, dude, ouch. Oh.
You okay?
She looked at me, and she's, little chin's kind of starting to quiver a little bit. I go, is there a lot of blood? She looks, and she goes, oh. Go, man, if there's not a lot of blood, worth a tear.
Yep.
We're good. Shut off.
Yep.
And she was so funny. She's like, okay.
Yeah.
She literally
100%.
pushed herself off.
Yep.
And it was so cool because again, when she got up and she's like, "But my skirt." And I go, "Oh." She goes, "Well, you probably like that. You didn't like the skirt." And I go, "No, but I'm very sad that your favorite." And I did not like the skirt. She
Yeah.
knew. I did not want to wear it. And you've actually heard about this skirt, Randy. Um,
Yep.
might not remember, but you've heard about it. Anyway, so I said to her, I said, "You know what, Alyssa? I didn't like that skirt, but I'm actually my heart hurts for you right now because you liked it so much. It doesn't make me feel good that it's now ruined." And I said, "I'll try to stitch it up and fix it." And I never did. It's actually a joke in my family if I'm going to sew a button onto something or not. I have a pile, but
Mhm.
it's been about 6 years.
We just give it to my mom.
I tell them to give it to me, but I just never do it. It,
Yeah.
it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Put a band-aid on one of her alligators. She
Oh
needed it
God.
stitched. I'm like,
Hey,
"Here's a band-aid."
congratulations. Congratulations. There you go.
Band-Aid's good.
And as a final reminder for everybody, we are taking donations for To Write Love on Her Arms. So feel free that the exclamation point donate will be active forever. As long as I'm streaming, it'll be active. So go ahead, please use that URL if you feel like donating. Again, great cause. Absolutely love it.
Absolutely.